Hey guys, this is Josh Pasmore with a video interview on whole systems design. Why whole systems design? It's time to reinvent the way society works. We're built upon a hierarchical system where you have leaders of countries, leaders of businesses, much like a caveman, not making sense with anyone else, just follow me, doesn't have to talk about what the best roadmap is, doesn't even have to make a plan. Can continually fail and get back up and is still the leader. Today we see that through the monetary system instead of brute force. And so there's people running around as leaders with the monetary system backing that up and actually supporting this chaotic power struggle takeover world that's emerged and will never ever change until we change the basic principles, the basic underlying structure of society, the way it's organized, the way we make sense. And so the more that we switch how we're organized, the more we get to step into a flowing society. The more we make sense together in a way that works, the more we'll be able to have peace of mind and not have to compete over resources in a proper system that works very well. And the more that we have this, the more that we're going to start to trust the system, the more that we're going to start to trust each other, the more that we're going to put our cards on the table and say, all right, let's bring our family and friends back into the house. Let's move forward together. Let's quit this distraction and let's find out what we're here on earth to do. Let's start fulfilling our purpose, living with passion. And soon, the more that this happens, the more globally we'll have a shift into a much higher energetic world in which we get to participate in. And the more this happens, the more people are going to want to be here on earth. And we can start to identify which problems still might exist or might come forth. And we can meet those head on as a society instead of leaders who could possibly be corrupted into making decisions that really don't make sense. So please check out the next video. It's very important because it's time to redesign our society. If you don't understand some of the verbiage, there will be a glossary of terms somewhere in the link below, and feel free to ask any questions that you might have in the chat, and we'll try to get to those. All right, thanks.
Systems get you some. We are all in systems all the time. The body is a system. A car is a system. This ecosystem is a system. But the organizations and structures that we're stuck in, how are they structured? How are they organized? Who designed this? Who made this world? Who chose and agreed to be a part of this? Ultimately, the systems that we're stuck in, most of them are not a complex adaptive system. They are a heap of disconnected parts. And so in this great quest to unfuck the world and get ourselves back to a functioning holistic society that is actually in agreement with the world that we're in, not fighting against it, not fighting against ourselves, the answers are often in the structures that we are in, not necessarily the people that are in them. There's, of course, a feedback loop between the people and the systems, but I'm going to introduce you guys to one of my best friends in this fight. Joshua Pasmore is a systems designer, a whole systems designer. He's an extremely thorough person. He's someone that when I met him, I think in the comment threads of a Daniel Schmachtenberger post or something like that, people were arguing about all this system and that, and Josh was just so confidently and calmly being like, oh yeah, we've tried that. It works. This doesn't. And we immediately struck up a friendship that was bonded over this sense of rigorousness, of rigorously questioning the structures and systems that we're in, and not just thinking, oh, we're going to go start an eco-village and it's going to be great, or oh, we're going to start a new company structure and because we have the new paradigm, it's all going to work out great. This is a man who's been fastidiously deconstructing the existing systems that we're in, from our debt-based monetary system to the set of agreements and laws that are ultimately what construct how we make sense of things together, and the structure of organizations itself. So, Josh, why don't you introduce yourselves and let's go on a little journey to restructure the organization and the social system, the software, the social contract, the set of agreements that hold us all together.
Thank you for the wonderful intro. Yeah, it's good to be here. I'm excited.
All right. So introduce yourself. Who are you? What are you here for? What are you doing? Why did you incarnate into this sphere?
Well, what I do is I build sense-making processes and do some whole systems design to move us from a solo hero's journey to a collective hero's journey. And I've been on this path for 20 years. The first 8 years of those, I was coming at it very masculine, very structural, male, do the thing, build the project, get the money, finance the business, and build the city or the new paradigm or whatever you want to call it. I had a turning point where I spent a few years in Costa Rica doing some shamanic things and looking for the balance of the masculine and feminine and looking for the language of the heart. And spent the next 8 years focusing on the feminine, the next steps, the process, not the 30-year out vision. And then that's 16. And so then about 2 years we spent as a group buttoning up these systems. We had already road tested them a few times, but we did some more road testing. And then the last year and a half, I've been working on having the rubber hit the road, which would be a project called SURE, Synergy Hub Universal Residencies, which is an opportunity for us to make these concepts and systems that have been built real and to have a multi-locational living centers that are interconnected and interweaved. And before that, 20 years, I grew up in Austin, Texas. I was born in Australia. I got into some issues as a youth and ended up in Oregon, where I became a land developer, a general contractor. Then I did loan officer. And then when the market started falling in 2009, I had acquired $3 million of property. And I started to get into business plan development, business plan funding, business plan writing, and started to build on the Green City project, Green Earth City, and went to the Costa Rica, where I met the Minister of Sustainability, who approved this Green City being built in Costa Rica. And then the rest of the story, you know.
I like that we both have a little pirate flag in our background. That's nice. That's nice to know. It's a good bonding point. So yeah, the stuff that, I mean, this is all the hard structure of what we're trying to get into, restructuring the systems, the physical embodiment, the built environment, the habitat. But I think that the essential and the most hard hitting stuff, well, not to create an artificial sort of gradation in what you're doing. But the stuff for me that really just has such rawness and primacy and that is so refreshing and so thorough is the social system and the ways that you've been really designing and architecting how we socially enter into that new system and that structure. And so I'd love to start just cracking into it. And I think you have a presentation that's gonna include all of this stuff. But yeah, if you can just talk a little bit about the road testing and about the form of this sort of horizontal or circular or teal paradigm or holocratic or sociocratic, whatever the word for it is, this sort of new paradigm of organizing laterally rather than in a hierarchical sort of, regimented structures of bosses and workers and owners and employees. Time for a software update.
I came across the teal paradigm. Well, it was right during Standing Rock, whatever year that was. So Standing Rock was happening, and I had a Native American friend of mine, an elder. He called me up and said, "You should be paying attention to what's going on in the world. There's something happening." And that was Standing Rock. And right around that time, I was living in Costa Rica, trying to do the thing, build the dream. But at the same time, I had met a little resistance in my perceived outcome of how things would smoothly come together. And so I was doing a little self-reflection, and I guess I asked the universe, what are the best next steps? And what came to me was changing the way we do business, because business is more powerful than government, and it's being done wrong. And so I started to look at the basic outline, the principles of what that would look like when I came across teal paradigm, which is a paradigm as an organizational structure or a worldview. I realized that it fit perfectly with what I was wanting to create, and there was already a framework built. So as I looked into that, I looked at things such as holacracy and sociocracy and started to look at what parts were the good parts and what parts be able to evolve into a new system, the kind of world that everyone would want to be a part of. And some of these holacracy, sociocracy, they're a great framework as they help us create self-organized businesses where before we couldn't do that. And now through people like Encode who have taken the holacracy frameworks and sociocracy and putting them into, whether it's an LLC, a nonprofit, now we can self-organize. And there's 3 pillars of the teal paradigm. One is self-organization. That's been done. The second is purpose-driven, which there's a lot of work that's been done by Frederick Laloux of Reinventing Organizations, who's one of the grandfathers of the teal paradigm. The teal paradigm being a emergent movement that has many grandfathers. And the third system being whole living systems, the third pillar. And so this is what I've been working on. Well, how can we take these self-organized systems and how is that going to transition over the next 30 years into what my project was, Green Earth City, a whole systems designer, which is what I already was doing. So how do we take the current frameworks that have been built that do match the values of where we want to go? However, they're built for the old system still. So how do we modify these so we can smoothly transition into the new paradigm while having fun and while living our values?
Yeah, I mean, there's a great point to be made in there about business has more power than government. And it's one of the most powerful axes of change. I mean, I don't really like the word business. I think about this amazing Spanish in an Italian village who she drank wine and she spit it all over the fire and it exploded. And she's like, we don't want the business. We want the easiness. So we want to create easiness in the world, but we do that through self-organizing, distributed teams of people coming together decentrally to solve problems rather than giant centralized structures. It's very unfortunate to me that business has come to dominate that in the way that we do, that the corporation has come to dominate that. But, the part of the frontier of our rediscovery and of our orientation into meeting the world where it's at, in a very insane world, a very chaotic and crazy and cluttered heap of parts, especially in the resistance and the rebellion in the new world, in the reconstruction of the system. People are using these old structures and formations to, reorganize ourselves into a self-destructive, cancerous structure that is disconnected from life and pits us against each other. And so the task here is, how do we continue to distribute power into bottom-up organizations of people coming together to solve problems cooperatively in a way that is not zero-sum, in a way that is not structured as a pyramid scheme, or one that doesn't consolidate power or wealth, one that doesn't have a mandate for endless growth, and one that is truly a whole system. So without further ado, why don't you bust out the presentation, Josh, and let's go on a little hero's journey to collective organizational liberation.
Sounds great. All right. So yeah, this is a little presentation that we'll give a brief overview, and what you can do is we can potentially attach a version to wherever this ends up.
The New Earth operating system.
So we call this NEOS, stands for New Earth Operating System, and this is an operating system that follows the teal paradigm principles. All right. And so as you can see, all of our systems are a part of the teal paradigm. What is an ethos? It stands for Emergent, Thriving, Holonic Organizational Structure. These are the structures that I spoke of that we're moving from the holacracy DAO type of structures into whole living systems. These are full array of ecosystems that work together, such as you would find in a city. Imagine a city where you don't even have to interact with the outside world. So you're like an autonomous human being or organism where you have all your needs met within yourself, and you're able to function and move forward coherently together.
There's a great point in there about the superlinear evolution or growth or something, basically, that is in the ways that cities function, that the more traditional sort of hierarchical organization grows, the more that the centralized structures and bureaucracies and management class grows to maintain it, and it becomes less innovative. It becomes more sluggish. The culture slows down. Whereas in a city, the more people are in a city, the more innovation there's going to be, the more people that are going to be solving problems, the more brains there are in the ecosystem because they're all distributed. And I think that it's a great metaphor for how we want to construct the new organizational landscape, is that it's a space where there are many buildings, many organizations, many circles or holons, where people are coming and going in between many of them. They don't just live in one forever. If you're in a city, you generally don't just stay in your house forever. You go into other locations. You go and connect with others in commons and public spaces like parks or trains, and you go in and out of other spaces that you frequent. And so, yeah, we're creating eventually the framework and the organizational system for inter-organizational coordination and connection, and sort of leaving the silos of our own individual organizations without losing the autonomy to steward them and to, create our own culture and have our own rule set and do things, essentially in the ways that we configure them, but just around these larger sets of agreements and principles that allows us to do it in a whole system way that is interoperable, that actually could be totally self-sustaining, but also totally interconnected all over the world.
Much like cells in the human body, we want to all have a roadmap that we can all agree on in a common language, so that one cell goes left and one cell goes right, and so that we're flowing through what I imagine us being able to be on an exciting ride. I call it light speed, but I don't mean the busy business fast, hurry as fast as you can go. I mean unleashed, where you're able to be in your creative power. Our creative state is one of the closer states to God, to our spirit. We're continually in a creation mode, and we're free. And those top-down structures don't allow that. They disconnect from each other and kill off anything outside of them. If you look at the current corporations and you draw out a pyramid, I wish I had that in front of me. Imagine the top triangle being the investors or the stockholders, and then the people at the bottom that are all the workers that get paid minimum wage, and all the profits are going to people who are not doing anything. It's backwards.
And it's not just a pyramid scheme, it's a volcano, because the economic energy, the value that is being created is actually going up to the top, and it is being blasted out either through the shareholders, or it's just being sort of leaked out the bottom in streams that end up back in landlords and corporations again and again.
It's a siphoning system that siphons money and energy up to the top. Decisions get made at the top, and the people at the bottom, when they get really big, are disconnected from whoever owns and is making the true decisions. And so now you have different culture, corporate culture emerging that includes toxic domination culture, gossip, and all these things that people don't want to bring into their villages and their homes. And as we move into a regenerative living environments where we're working and living together, we have to come up with new structures, because nobody wants to be told what to do in their own home or have a new king. So these people that are bringing these old paradigm energies, ideas, and they come in and they want to start a business, but they're presenting it as this new paradigm, new earth type of vibe, but they're structuring it as a top-down control. What's happening, and what's been happening for years, and I've been a part of many of these projects, is they fall apart very quickly because people are signing up for a self-organized system, and what they're finding out is they're having a new king and queen that tells them what to do in their own home in every single aspect of their life, and it's not what we're trying to create. So a system is a reflection of the values that are behind the creation of it. So in this diagram, you can see a little bit about whole living systems. That little box on the left, you'll see a system and a heap. A system is interconnecting parts functioning as a whole, much like a flashlight. They can be organized in a little bit different ways, but they've got to work. It's got to turn on. A heap is just a collection of parts. Imagine throwing all those parts of the flashlight together. It's not going to work. System changes when you take away pieces or add more. If you cut it in half, you do not get two smaller systems. You get a damaged system. And a heap, you can basically take pieces out, put them in, and it won't matter. You just get more heaps and different smaller heaps. Okay, so you can read this, and this is a part of a presentation that you can pass out. So Omni 1 is our ecosystem. This is what we've used: NEOS, New Earth Operating System, and Ethos, Emergent Thriving Holonic Organizational Structure. It's built with the ethos and using the NEOS technology. So these are the things that Omni 1 focuses on: currency, decision-making, community, and agreements.
So it's a real quick recap, though. A whole system, it means everything is connected to everything else, and that everything has sends a ripple through the whole system. And what we're trying to do here with the whole system isn't to just change one thing. Like the Bitcoin people are like, just change the money and everything else is going to follow. Or eco-village people are like, just get people in eco-villages and everything will follow. This is an overarching way of looking at these things, is all fundamentally interconnected, not just in a groovy, we're all one man kind of way, but understanding that, we need to think of everything. We need to consider all the parts of the system in the same way that an organism is connected completely to its whole surroundings. And so to remove one species from an ecology is actually going to affect everything. And this is the fundamental principle, which is simple, but it's also adaptive, and it grows and swells and shapes.
Yeah, there's a book called The Infinite Game. Imagine there's a flow of river. Rivers are energy, and the banks or the sides of the walls are the structure which holds that energy in. So in the current system, of course, all that, it's a machine, and that's all been built for us. And it's our job to dig our way out and get out of that system, first of all. So they say in the finite game, you play within the boundaries. In the infinite game, you play with the boundaries. And this is what we're creating with these systems, is systems in which us as a self-organized system can create the boundaries of which we want to play in. And so when we release our energy or when we fund a project, we've already mapped out those boundaries or the banks of the river. We've built the structuring. Let's say it's going down a hill. That's how I like to imagine it. If you set the money loose or the energy free, and money is chi energy stored, at least in some regards, even though it's been hijacked. If you set that energy free on a hill with no structure, it's just going to flow everywhere, and it's going to just go everywhere and be wasted. But once we build the right container together and we understand together coherently what's going to happen when the water turns on, and then we can self-organize and play with the boundaries, and we get to create that future instead of someone else creating it for us.
So just a very simple summation: structure creates flow. The banks of the river that are shaped creates the channel that allows things to flow. Bad structure, no structure, creates disorder, and the water's just going everywhere and we're losing it. Whereas we're trying to create a flow that allows it to catch and pool and recirculate and continually flow through a whole system. All right, moving on.
And we're using the masculine and the feminine, so the structure and the energy together. And like you said, some people think it just takes money. It just takes flow. So here's the ethos comparison to a DAO or a corporation. So in an ethos, we're geared always to following our true purpose. It's purpose-driven. A DAO could be. Corporations are rarely. There's a great video by one of the fathers of the Teal Paradigm, Frederick Laloux, called Fake Purpose on YouTube. Suggest watching it. It's a really cool little video. It's pretty short.
Well, the purpose is painted on at the end. It's like they have their structural orientation in a larger economy that's chosen for them. They've never questioned it. Then they basically structure themselves around what is going to get them money, and then they paint the purpose on after that and say, oh, we care about environment, we care about this, we care about that. And so that's a big part of the storytelling that we're working to change. And the storytelling really has to be embedded into this whole, got to be walked in every aspect of the system.
So you can see whole systems integration. Our ethos are built to work together to build whole systems. DAOs do not do that, none that I've seen. Corporations do not. Self-organized, yes. DAOs, yes, they're self-organized. At least they're supposed to be. Some DAOs are built wrong. They call them a DAO, but they have a leader and a controller. It's actually possible. It's a newer technology, or it's a newer thing, so people can get it wrong. And so the DAO space can look messy. Anything new can always look messy. And this is the thing is about road testing something and working on it, building the plan of the house before you build it. You start building these plans and everyone else sees it. This has happened with almost every movement that I've been a part of. You could even just look at, like when I was growing up, the word green didn't mean sustainable. It just meant money. People didn't really know what that meant. Some people, like Jock Fresco. Then all of a sudden, everyone was jumping on the train, including government organizations and people creating LEED certifications and stuff. So you're always going to have some clunkiness in the beginning and a lot of people doing it wrong. Try not to let that detract from what the thing is. That's the good thing about the teal paradigm is it has an exact structure. And so not anyone can just say, oh yeah, we're new paradigm, we're teal paradigm. You've got to be able to toe the line. So the whole systems integration, self-organized, collective intelligence, the ethos has worked, and one of our biggest things we've done is the sense making and how are we moving forward, collectively making decisions so we're not stepping over each other, because a solution for one person could be a problem for another. And if we're not communicating and we're on the same team and we're just doing what we want and we misfire, and it can affect the whole system and everyone. So we've got to be able to work together coherently and use collective intelligence. And so this is one of the biggest aspects. DAOs, there's pieces, everyone has pieces of this, but rarely have I seen it come together where it's able to be road tested and scaled and everyone's happy about the decisions and they're moving towards their shared values and not randomly. Corporations do not use collective intelligence. Neither does our government. Corruptible ethos is non-corruptible. And this has to do with our economic standards, our intellectual property standards, which DAOs and corporations don't have. In fact, corporations have quite the opposite. What's possible now interorganizationally, people know what they're signing up for. Decentralized teams can now come together. They fall apart. Many times I've seen them fall apart. They don't know how to make decisions. They got the same vision, but then they fall apart. Number one, people knowing what they're signing up for. I see this as the tipping point between centralized and decentralized. Somewhere in the middle is distributed. And when people know what they're signing up for, people are going to leave Walmart and everywhere else. When you say, hey, we're going to work together like this, we're going to distribute funds like this, versus you just do what I say and you get paid minimum wage, people are going to start moving towards this new paradigm. However, we have road tested it. We're building it. It's taking a lot longer than most people want.
Well, I want to speak to that. Not a lot of people are thinking on this level, and a lot of people are rushing headfirst into whatever the new thing is, or into DAOs, or into even rushing into a sociocratic structure without really thinking about how we make agreements and how we sort of plan generationally and how we get aligned onto the same page and how we sort of cohere. And so this is a very nuanced and very advanced social technology that we're sort of learning as we go how to sort of cultivate into the structure of the system.
Yes, exactly. I think it's putting the cart before the horse, even when people come in with saying, let's get funding, and they haven't done the groundwork, and the funds come in, and whoever brought those funds in says, well, here's what we're doing. I'm hiring this guy and this, and they just start making the decisions and then it just falls back. It just defaults right on back to the old paradigm. I've seen it many times. So here's the advantages between orgs. So this is something you can look at later. These are the charts that understand what we have is called a gen plan. Think of it like an operations manual. So what it does is it's something that everyone can look at and sign up to and understand where they're at, kind of like the Bible. The Bible was a book that not only had a lot of stories and principles, but it's also something that people could live their life by. So we've created this because right now we have business plans, and this is not a substitution for a business plan, by the way. You still have to have a good business plan in today's world. It's got to make sense. It's got to reciprocate, have money coming in. It's got to be self-perpetuating. And those are all done in the business plan. This is how we work together, not what we're doing, but how we're doing it. So how are we making decisions? How are we onboarding? How are our teams flowing back and forth? How do we deal with conflict resolution or prevention, et cetera, et cetera? By the way, we do conflict prevention. We don't have to do as much conflict resolution. So at the bottom, you'll see the culture code. This is the first level.
If only. If only we had such systems in place before these things happen.
Yeah, and that's our solutionary culture does a lot of that. It's saying, hey, we have these agreements already built. It's already there. You're already in this gen plan. And so if something goes wrong, you can look and say, hey, was an agreement broken or not? And if it wasn't, we're saving all that time fighting each other over something that one of us thinks is right and one of us doesn't, but we never talked about it.
And also understanding where we're going as well in a visionary sense, in a truly visionary sense. I've been working the last few days on the mythos of other organizations, helping them figure out, like, what is your story? What is the log line? Like, what is the plot? Like, where did you come from and where you're going? And this is the ethos, literally the ethos of the organization. And it's like, how are we organizing ourselves to embody this and move toward it in a much more visionary and all-encompassing way than just saying, here's how we get to the money, or here's how we get from this milestone to the next. It's really holistic. It's like, how are we becoming this thing that we're trying to create?
Let's start at the top. That tells us, as a society, who do we want to hang out with? Who do we want to play with? Do we want to play with crooks and liars, or do we want to play with awesome, amazing champions of the kind of team that we want to be a part of? So who in the world do we want in our field, kind of stuff? And we spent 2 years just building the universal agreement fields, just 10, 15 agreements that everyone would want, built by the collective, not a person. And then you have your general plan. So within that, you have your smaller ethos, call it an organization. You might have an ethos that is cleaning up the water. One might be marketing. One might be legal, lawful stuff. So think of it like a business in some ways, but they can transcend those boundaries. Ethos do operate a little differently than just a business. Once again, they're interconnected, and you'll see that graph in a little while. So that's the general plan. Each ethos, each department will have its own gen plan, and it will tell the rest of it, will inform, much like a band playing together in real time. It will inform the others of what their next steps are and what they're doing, and it will give real-time feedback and reflections for all of this, which is super critical. And this is what a whole systems needs, and there's no one doing this, by the way. Then within that plan, you have normal spec plans. We have an application within the tech team that they would create a spec plan. Everyone would understand what's going on. There's something we call domains within our sense-making process that understand how these spec plans and gen plans come to be and pass, and how we can make proposals, and all these things that are very, very smooth. I would love to do a full session on it. We do have a video on our site, omni1.world, and it does talk about the ACT process. There might be a link somewhere in here on it.
I would love to actually get a little free coaching here and do a next follow-up to this pod and just create a gen plan for the organization that we're building here in Other World is Possible, and all of our different plans. I'm sure that there's a next stage to this that's an intergenerational plan for organizations coming together and creating sort of interoperational agreements.
It's kind of like putting together two different currencies sometimes. If they're a really good match, great. I can trade you my coin for Ethereum, okay? However, if you're talking, let's just say I have the tree coin, and it's a coin that I built, and you have the grass coin. It's like they could be built completely different. And in a true economy, and I mean a closed loop economy, let's say a village, which is the summation of the trees and the houses and all the stuff in the village, right? That's there. That's the sum of its economy. In a cryptocurrency, it's the same thing. What's the summation of everything? Let's say that one person has done some tech work and they've built a half of an app, and the other people have built an apartment building. Well, if we just start trading those coins, there might be 100 people in the tech group that have built something that's not even useful yet, and they may be running over to cash their coins in at the hotel that was built by the people. You see what I'm saying? And it would flood the hotel, and the people that actually did the work to build that hotel would be getting nothing out of it, if that app even ever comes to existence or even helps or any of that. It's complicated when you're mixing two people, because if they're making decisions different, a lot of these people, like I said, they run out there and they're trying to do a project, but then they're actually structured as a hierarchy with their name and their brand all wrapped up in this thing that basically they're super attached to, and they're attached to what they call intellectual property, which is just an idea that's not even been registered. So there's a control point that's hard to get past with that.
So yeah, that's an essential point to build on in future, that we need to figure out how to become interoperable, even with structures that don't fully abide. I mean, that's the brilliance of a truly complex system, is it can integrate. Like, the body can deal with toxins. It does know how to get some of them out. And if you use the right herbs or the right medicines or the right toxin binders, you can pull them out. And so, yeah, basically the idea of the space of inter-organizational agreements, for this model to spread, it's going to have to be resilient enough to interoperate. And we're going to have to be able to create agreements with flawed actors, let's say.
Yeah, and hopefully they're vetted and they're understanding. That's a whole discussion but yes, we have a very smooth road-tested process and all that it works great, and we just have to get it out there and start doing it. So why? Well, why do we create the Gen Plan for the ethos? Because once we create these plans, 99% of our decisions are made. We don't have to sit there on call after call after call making a decision on every little thing. You have the blueprints, you go build the house for the next 2 years. If something major comes up, you can come back to the group and say, hey, this thing happened, here's what we're proposing to fix it. Everyone gets clear on it, because that might affect another team. So this is a really comprehensive whole systems design. And once again, this solves 99% of our wasted time in the decision room. All right, now we get to structure and economies. So this is visual representation. And what you'll find if you dig deep enough or do enough research or enough self-thought on these things is that the economic model and the organizational model always match. So on the left, you'll see the fiat economy. The money comes in the top and it gets distributed down. On the right, the decisions come in the top and get distributed down. That's the standard system that we all are living in. And I wouldn't say all, because obviously it's not everything or everyone, but I think most people relate to that. And this just represents what we can do. We can build a new system, which will look like this, inside of that pyramid structure. And this is something we can do now. This is what the new system looks like. And once again, ours is based on a contribution economy. Some people also call it an access economy, resource-based economy. Those are all pretty much interchangeable, depending on, Michael Tellinger has contributionism, which is a little different than a contribution economy. So different people might have different versions of what that looks like for them. However, this is based on our contribution. It deals with access and resources versus the fiat economy. And it matches. You can see on the right, the organization has the universal agreement fields that we spoke of. That's for everyone you would want to be a part of in your society. On the left, we have a lawful border that holds the money together and says what it does and has all that wonderful stuff that's so transparent and fair. And so in the contribution economy, imagine on the left here, I mean, they're the same picture, but there's these 6 smaller circles. Those, let's just say that one's the building department, one's the automotive, food, housing, everything, whatever. Instead of packaging up the food, putting a price tag, putting it to a store to sell to your neighbor, instead we're growing together. And not everyone's gonna be a farmer. Maybe someone's building the automotive part. So this is an exchange, a way that we can use time banking laws, help your neighbor laws, and create a contribution economy, which is a pure form of what we're speaking about. And it's going to sound very utopian to many people. However, there is a transition to this. This is not something that I'm proposing that we just jump right in. There's a transition. And on the right, you'll see the organization. It's the same. You have the teams, and this little star pattern in the middle is the system that connects all those teams, and that works the same with that contribution economy. Any questions, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, how does contribution work in relation to access?
So you contribute and you gain access. So access on this third on the right, you would have taking money from the outside world. Let's say that one person in your team is making millions and he teaches 3 more people to make millions, and that all's coming, instead of in their pockets, that's coming actually into the system, that everyone gets to have a new water park and gym, and it can just be exponentially amazing. But those are being turned into assets. So on the right, you have level 2A, level 2 access. That functions purely on a contribution economy. And so they only provide access to resources based on contribution. So I might work what we consider part-time, 4 hours a day, and I might get access to all this stuff that I spoke of, right? Everything that's available, besides maybe specific stuff that you might have to still have a license for, like flying a plane or whatever. General access to everything in exchange for my contribution. Now, if I put overtime in, different people can make different systems. This is a choose your own adventure, build your own ecosystem, societal framework. This is not a one-way fits all. So this is not what we're proposing. I'm giving an example of something that does work, that has been tested in most instances. And this part of the contribution has not been fully tested, but we know that the legal parameters around it all check out. So we can take the middle level 2 ethos. Let's say it's a church. They buy land and they hold it in the level 2A, or they send that money from the current paradigm into a stewarded piece of land that everyone can access. And in return, they get access to this land, but that keeps it safe, okay? Because it keeps it out of the hands of the corporate identity, of which normally would be attached or bonded to that piece of land or that resource. So we're freeing the resources before we access them. And that's why this is like this. So the middle circle can use fiat, it can use access, it's in between, and it's a part of the ecosystem. And then on the left, you have normal corporations, LLCs, nonprofits that are operating in the current system, but we've set them there on purpose, or we're working with them on purpose to bring resources into the system, and we give them support in return.
That's what I was talking about, the interoperability, that we're sort of alluring them into relationship that shows a better way. And at heart, this is about building the commons. It's about building beautiful common infrastructure that makes the home that we share beautiful for all. And so the example I'm thinking of is in Kenya, the Mijikende that I spent some time with, that Will Ruddick of Grassroots Economics works with and is working to bring their system into this field. They had this system called the Mweria, which was like a commitment pooling system where it's all about contribution. But people sort of come together at this central spoke and they contribute, and they commit to helping each other in their different projects. And that gives them access to the commons. And if somebody stops contributing, if they stop making their agreements, if they break those agreements, then there's generally a graduated set of sanctions. There'll be a stick in their yard. That's kind of like, hey, watch yourself, motherfucker. Contribute. Be a part of the whole. And, you know, generally this idea of the fear of the free rider, that, oh, if things are free, then people aren't going to contribute, is really broken. It's a broken thought. It's a broken mentality, and it comes from that hierarchical system where people only do things because you tell them to, because they're bossed around, or because you pay them, you know, scarce access tokens to get things that they want. Money is an access token. It's just a condition that's placed upon access that only validates a certain kind of contribution. So you could say all economy is a contribution economy. It's just been corrupted and perverted by a system that is designed to gate that access based on coercion and slavery. So yeah, this is a transitional system as well. I mean, ultimately, access is the most efficient way for us to distribute resources. Sharing, the dinner table. You're not using a token gate to get food or the gravy boat around the dinner table. You just share. It just makes the most sense. And most corporate life does not happen with money exchanging hands. If you're on a job site for Bechdel, Someone asks you to hand them a hammer, you don't say, give me $5. You give it to them. You're in this contribution access sort of economy in a way all the time.
Yeah, there would be agreements around that, like, hey, it's a community hammer. Let's do it together. You wouldn't be aligned to someone on a team like that anyway. A lot of people think when you say even just the word contribution, oh, it's a hippie thing. This is not a hippie thing. This is not a gift economy. They immediately imagine things in the old system that don't work. And that's not what this is. This is not that. This is a very new creation, and it's, once again, the teal paradigm is the evolution of the paradigms. It's whole living systems using biomimicry and nature to build our systems. And so it's very well thought out, and it's not just hodgepodge. Everyone's going to be nice to each other and slap a sticker on it. And there is agreements and boundaries and clarity. It's about clarity.
On that subject, can you talk about agreements and agreement fields? Because this is a really profound thing that we don't understand generally. You know, law is a placeholder for a set of agreements that we all have. And basically, we're all sort of born into this massively complex set of agreements that no one really knows, that we're all just meant to sort of figure out. There's some obvious stuff in there, like don't go around killing people or taking things that aren't yours. But of course, corporations have restructured the law to enable them to kill people and take things that aren't theirs anyway. So yeah, what does it mean to form agreements and to create an agreement field?
So part of that is sense making. I don't know if this will have a live link on it, but you can go to the, once again, omni1.world and find FAQs to answer a lot of these questions in detail, as well as find this decision-making act. So you make agreements through decisions, and agreement will clarify a principle, which clarifies a value. So our values are our guide to where we're going. Our heart is envisioning this future we want to live in of peace and prosperity and whatever our values are. And our mind is there to work with the heart. This is not just the eagle condor prophecy, but this is how we should be handling all our relationships, and most importantly, our relationship with ourselves. And we might want to live this healthy future, but our heart's going to say, well, I want to go out and, drink and party. And then our mind's going to say, wait, I thought you wanted to be healthy. And so this is how they work together. The mind can see the roadmap to that future and help us make practical decisions to get there. However, it's our values that is guiding us. And this picture, even I just noticed, has a boat in it. So this is our values guiding us to where we want to go. And the principles back up the values. They could be loving to each other, do unto others. However, those aren't clear. So you're going to have internal conflict if you just make a bunch of principles. And this is another thing we've done very well and spent many years on, is making actual agreements. And these are agreements. These aren't, we're born in a world where people do not know what an agreement is. They're born in a world in which agreements have been forced on us. Laws, not agreements. They call them laws. So that's why we call them agreements. They're not laws. You don't have to do them. You don't even have to be in them. But once again, there's it sets everything out in the gen plan, and there's an ecosystem plan. And you get to look at that before you come in and say, do I align with every single piece of this? And if not, wholeheartedly, whole body, yes, and full understanding. And if not, then you should be able to change that, create something new with some new people, etc. And there's the opportunity to do that. So these are agreements, or you're forming something new with people once again. So we found that 85% of people, we've looked at their full potential goal, and most of them want to build a minimum viable product for society, one that would replace the current system, and that would solve their biggest problems. So we can say that it's our collective goal that we want to create a new society, and this solves most people's problems. You can name a slew of problems.
I just think this is very profound, and I think it's a very fundamental misalignment in most of our culture that, we have a general sort of idea, like you said, be nice, be loving, but that's not an agreement. That's not something that you can actually agree to in an if-then statement. It's like, if you are raising your voice and shouting and making me feel a whole body no, then it's not something that you can actually hold this space together, right?
Yeah, I know you're giving an example, but that would be vague. You're giving me a whole body no, but that's subjective.
So give me an example of a good agreement. Okay, let's say somebody on a team is not communicating. They're communicating poorly, and it's creating a bottleneck, and it's not allowing information to flow. They're holding assets and information that's keeping things back. How can you form an agreement around that that's going to ensure that things flow?
We have agreements around the information we share with our team. We're self-organized at a minimal, and when that product from that team is ready, they share it with the whole. So that's in the agreements, that we're not keeping things from our team. That's in the ethos agreements already. There's things like, if I feel off balance, I agree to take a moment and recenter myself. And you can say, hey, are you off balance? And we're not saying, well, you didn't recenter yourself. It's a gentle reminder. These agreements, there's not meant to be a whole law library of agreements where it's just all this structure that basically deadens us from moving anywhere, because we don't know what's law and what's not law, and we don't even know. So we might as well just forget it, and we're just stuck. And so that's too much structure. That's too heavy on the male structuring. We want to be able to be emergent, and this is why we're building our own systems. And so an agreement could be, before I make a assumption, I agree to asking questions to clarify. And so that's very measurable. Someone comes and they say, you're this, you did this and that means you're this. You say, well, wait, that's an assumption, right? So remember, we agreed to ask questions. Okay, well, did you mean to do this? And you say, actually, no, I didn't mean to do that. Oh, well, I thought because, no. And so if they had done that in the beginning, you can see how that would be just a very smooth conversation, and that would prevent the conflict from happening. So simple agreements, it could be, take your shoes off when you enter the room. It's a very clear agreement. It's very clear. There's nothing weird about it.
Don't pollute the water source. Pretty simple. I think about my friend, my Awako and Kogi friends. They are in agreement with the natural living system. They are constantly asking permission, and they are communicating with the ecosystem, and they have a set of agreements for everything. And if there is an agreement, they don't proceed. And if they don't have consensus, they don't proceed. I think that's really what this is about at core. But it isn't about every single decision needs to be agreed to every single time. It's like you're creating a set of agreements that hold you into a field. It's like when you sense a tension, you can create a role, you can create a new circle, or you can create an agreement that's saying, hey, this is a tension that we're all feeling, that's a consistent thing that affects everybody. Let's sort of draw this through line through the whole circle, the whole organization, and sort of define this agreement as something that needs to be upheld.
Yeah, if there's not an agreement to handle it, you can always propose that, and you just have to say, hey, here's an issue or problem or whatever you want to call it. Tension, and so it's just the difference of where you're at and where you want to be. That's all.
So, Josh, we skipped a couple of sides. Well, can you talk about the consortium? Actually, I think that's interesting, because that seems like that's the intergenerational agreement, or that's the interorganizational agreement.
Yeah, interorganizational. You can see that there's at the top sharing nothing. They come into a consortium field where they start to share some different things. And then if they want to come into an ecosystem together, they're going to be in a universal field, and they're going to start sharing more and more things. This needs to be updated. This is a slide I threw in here for when we did our presentation with the Venus Project. And so number 3, you start to get into a space together. So imagine number 2 is where you're working together within an ecosystem, but you're not in the same space. And so you're sharing a lot of stuff. However, you start living with people. We're allowing the space and providing the space in the Synergy Hub Universal Residency Project for things like this to emerge. However, we're not forcing anything at all to emerge. So if you were to come together as an ethos and live together, you would already have established all of these agreements ahead of time. We're allowing these to emerge while they don't have to. We can just use these as centers that we can all have different events and congregate around and move around and reorganize. And it's kind of a flowing center that allows for that. But if you were already working together, those would more easily fit into this third, where you have these detailed space agreements. Each place in a community center or in a village, each room can have its own agreement field, and it can have 24 of them in 24 hours. Okay, it can have hour events all day long. So these things are very
Modular.
customizable.
So, Josh, we're running up on time here. There's so much more to get into. I was going to ask about the collective funding pools. I think that's a really important element of how we come into agreement, how we share the most fundamental resource of our time, which is money, which is the token gate on all of our other resources as we see it, until we can tier that and structure in new structures and new ways of forming agreements. But that's a really big component of how we come together and collaborate, and how we unlock the true potential of our ability to share and co-create. I mean, the existing system functions the way that it does because powerful people are pooling their scarce assets into larger and larger pools that grants them more and more power in the world, and it grants them the ability to pull more debt and then use that pool of resources as leverage over other people. And so our ability to start to do that is really where we start to structurally interconnect, where we aren't just sort of in agreement. We aren't just sort of on the surface level a part of something. We are actually saying my economic life and yours are one.
Yeah, and we want to be very careful because money is a power over thing. And if we have a system where people are allowed to do that, they will do it. You know, look at the prison experiment, the Stanford experiment. You put someone as a guard, as a role, and they're going to beat and mistreat the prisoners. It's human nature. So we don't give people the button that tortures everyone around them. We just don't give it to them.
Real quick, I'd say it's human nature to adapt to the shape of their container. And I think that the overarching thesis of all this structural change is that the structures that we're in really shape the people that we are. And it shapes the way that we interact with each other and the way that we do business or easiness or the way we govern, the way we make sense of the world. And so, yeah, if you put people into a system that's constrained and developed by a power over a system that was literally developed to enslave people, because that's what coins were. And debt itself begins in this I owe you until I own you. And that was instant. That was an instantaneous process when that sort of form of agreement, that form of currency entered human structure. So yeah, in the transition of disempowering those structures from shaping our consciousness to their formation, how do we start to pool that and transition and share and work with that resource?
Yeah, because these systems and structures are the main influence for our culture. So it's very important that if we create a new transportation system, we don't have to fix every driver in the world or give them tickets when they speed. So yeah, they're very powerful. So here's the economic flow. This, once again, people are very stinted on the money, and every situation is different. Every business is different. I showed you 3 different ethos, level 1, 2, and 3. They're going to be different. This is meant for a level 2A for sure ethos. Okay. This is the 2A contribution economy financial distribution chart. However, obviously there will be other iterations across different instances. So in this case, money would come in. We say escrow, but hopefully we get to the point where we have this bank account, let's call it, this funding pool that honors our decision-making process to the T, and it will never be corrupted. And what we decide is where it goes and how we decide. That would be great. Right now, it's super corruptible. It's ridiculous that humans haven't got to the point where they have an uncorruptible money system, but it is. So the first thing we do is we decouple the power over dynamics and the survival and take that away from money. And we do that through basic needs, the survival part. We don't want money to equal basic needs, survival. We want to take that out of people's heads. They contribute, they're part of the family, they're part of the tribe, and they're taken care of. We don't want someone working to not have their needs taken care of. So we have outlines of agreements. Sometimes there's a startup that does not have an income, and there's an agreement for that. And it says, I agree to not do more than I'm responsible for my own health, something like this. So we have our basic needs taken care of once that funding pool is getting a return on whatever it's done. And then we would pay off any debt that we incur. We do not take equity. So I'm not talking about equity. Equity equals control, and we don't want that. So we're talking about debt-free commons. Then it would go to the next steps of the Gen Plan or Eco Plan. Now, if there's an overflow after all that's covered and there's still money, you can increase your basic needs program and include vacations and computers and whatever, right? Build the collective commons and make better buildings and better access and a water park. So you can do all that with the overflow. As long as the critical next steps are taken care of, the rest would be overflow. That's an example. And none of this has anything to do with money. It can be done on a level 2 ethos, where they build the collective commons by putting money into real assets that are taken out of this controlled system that's corrupt. I'm not talking about the whole system. Everything's a system. Or increasing the basic needs. Basic needs is access. I'm accessing the food. I'm accessing the housing. I'm accessing the transportation. So none of those have to have money involved in them. But they can. So I can still work at my nonprofit, at my LLC, and then I can also go contribute.
I just want to the this isn't just hippie bullshit line. If new next generation organizations can utilize these structures and things like commitment pooling, time banking, mutual credit, community currencies, access systems to reduce the amount of money that it takes to run our organization. Before we go out trying to find new money, we should be first and foremost trying to collectively agree, how do we keep as much of this stuff in our system as possible? How do we need it as little as possible? How do we become more efficient? How do we become more self-sovereign, truly sovereign over our own resources, over our own ability to feed ourselves? How do we get rent out of the equation? How do we get ourselves to a position where we're not spending all of our time, money, and energy just trying to basically pay back these tokens to the system? So this is going to make organizations drastically more efficient and more effective and more connected. And the more that they're able to enter into these agreement fields and these systems and interoperate and coordinate and collaborate and share resources and share best practices and pool their resources, their capitals together, the less we need the money. And this to me is almost like a magic trick that you could say to the business boys, how would you like to pay workers less, pay less money for rent, make more profit? Actually, you're making more profit. You may be making less money or bringing less money in, but the amount that is the surplus over your costs is drastically increased because the costs are lower. You're not just paying everything out to, wages that are actually going to send people out into the world. We're ending wage slavery, first of all. We should be trying to do that. And there's all kinds of ways and mechanisms and structures that we can use to lessen the power that the dollar has over us and increase the plurality of our systems to make them more resilient, more connected, more efficient, and ultimately allow us to transcend the existing system through all of these different new structures connecting and pooling together into these flows and tributaries and rising tides that rises the standard of living of all of us. This is true systemic change, and it's a whole system. It comes about through all of these things in Congress, all of them working together, and through the synergy of bringing our actions and efforts together with so many other people, whether they're fully aligned or they're fully immersed into this shift, or whether they're just benefiting from it ambiently, and sort of as we interact and rub off on them, they're seeing, hey, that's a system that works. A complex system always emerges from a system that works. And that's first and foremost what we're trying to build here. So Josh, love talking about this with you. Would love to go more in depth in all of these different components individually and to actually integrate this into the system that we're working to build, to have all of the different projects in our field, utilizing these frameworks and these techniques and just this general consciousness. That's something I really want to just give you props on, is a level of consciousness that you've really thought through this. You've really questioned it. You haven't taken anything for granted. And that's how we raise ourselves out of these problems. Carl Jung said, we don't solve the problem by solving the problem. We don't quit smoking by quitting smoking, by focusing on smoking. We solve the problem by raising our consciousness so much that we become a part of a new reality that is so great that the problems before just shrink and cease existing, because we have erased ourselves into something new.
Oh.
Got any last words?
Thank you so much for your devotion and dedication in the field too. And you just grasp things so quickly. I love it.
Well, thank you, brother. I have good teachers and I have good friends like you that are doing the work for me. There's so many of us out there that have done our 10, 15, 20 years each. Josh, we'll keep weaving together and keep coming into this shared field together. And I see you as a partner, even though you're in your own separate sort of project. I don't see it as separate at all. I see it as something I'm holding this as technology to try to share with as many people as I can to get them utilizing it, so that basically, the system that's emerging is all of us starting to work with each other and use our systems and use our tech and our structures and our agreements, and then starting to stack our functions, because we're all trying to do the same thing, because we have the consciousness. We're at this place where we know what must be done. And that is not a question. It's just a process.
Yeah, we are there. This is the year.
All right, well, let's get out there and do it. Josh, how can people find you? How can they get involved? How can they pay you big bucks to come into their organizations and teach them how to do this? Or how can they start adopting and spreading these systems?
All right. Well, we have greenearthvision.org, which is a nonprofit that has different initiatives that you can look into. We have omni1.world, which explains this ecosystem, tealparadigm.org and .com that explain what the teal paradigm is. And then we have something called Nexus, which is where we're actually onboarding people. However, it's more of a gallery where people can come in and play together and start to learn about things. That doesn't have a site, but if you contact us at one of those other sites, there's places like in Green Earth Vision, for example. I think each site has its own place to contact us. And yes, we do ethos company rebuilding. There is a page on Omni One for that. However, right now we are going to multiple locations to start the Synergy Hub Universal Residencies. And for those who are interested, you can find that on greenearthvision.org, more information about it. And if you want to come be a part of it, sell your home in the old paradigm and move into the new paradigm, and you want to move into a new world where you get to go around to different themed centers, you'll get to learn more about that on the Green Earth Vision site.
All right, Josh. Well, onward. I agree that we're going to do this again soon.
Right, my man.
Another world is possible.
All right. Thanks.